Dawn Chapman. It's 6:35. The pointer, Deb. Friends in the hall, come on in.
One will work, but the clicker thingy doesn't. Which is the pointer? The big middle one.
There's a better together meeting to do we have a prayer last I'm all right. Can't complain.
Teacher wouldn't sign it.
He's almost safe though.
Okay, we're going to get started. How's everyone doing? Glad to see you guys.
No sleep, no snow.
That's for sure. Do I have to clap 3 times? Okay. So we do not have a prayer today. And I'm supposed to give the speech later about how we're not helpless and hopeless. So we're going to move on past the prayer unless someone would like to do it. Any volunteers? Going once, going twice. How about you, little guy? Okay. Everybody knows, well, wait, let's go back. Is anybody new? Never been to a meeting yet? Oh, some here, some here. Okay. So we have a West Lake Landfill Facebook page. If you're not familiar with that and you're on Facebook, you might want to join that. We also have an STL Glowing Strong Memorial page where you can go on and talk about just whatever you want. If you've been exposed or you've lost loved ones or you're sick or whatever. We have a new logo. And thanks to Kristen Camuso, she made Dawn and I this really cute logo with our heads on there. We do not have faces. We do not have faces, but I'm told it's because we're the face of the community. I think that was just something she made up, but whatever. It works. So anyway, we really like those. And Just Moms STL also has a Facebook page. If you have not liked that, we would like for you to go and do that. Our website, justmomsstl.org. Anybody still smelling the awful odors?
Did the other day.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, don't forget to report those odors. You can do so by phone, or you can go on our website or Facebook page and get the link to report the odor on. The church is having a pasta dinner tomorrow night from 6 to 7 and a praise concert at 7 p.m. If anybody would like to come out and support the church for everything they do for us.
You can buy tickets at the door.
Buy tickets at the door. And now we have a special guest. Oh, let's go back to elected officials. Do we have any elected officials in the room that would like to be recognized? Please stand, or just say your name, or whatever. Yay, hi! That's Bill Esterline. He's with the Prattville Fire Board. He's a little quiet. He at least has a face. Who else?
Linda Henry County Executive Steve Stenger.
Yay.
Ladies first. Paula
all-around state rep, District 70.
Doug Bennett, State Representative, 72.
Now we're going to move on to our special guest. We have Maria Bradford with the St. Louis Community Foundation here, and she is going to give you guys an update on where they stand with the AG's settlement money.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just going to be a very brief update. We've made some progress since the last time we were here, so we wanted to come back and let you know what is going on right now. You may or may not have seen that we've actually released 2 RFPs for 2 of the grant programs for the Bridgeton Landfill Community Fund. So we are currently have out an RFP for mental health and substance abuse programs, and one for small grants. And by small grants, we're talking about $5,000 or less. And those grants are specifically for organizations that are physically located within that 4-mile radius around the landfill. There will be a bidders conference for the mental health and substance abuse grants, and that is on February 26th, that's Tuesday, from 9 to 11 a.m. at the St. Louis Community Foundation offices. So if you know of any nonprofit organizations that might be interested in applying for those funds, that would be a great time for them to come in and get all of their questions answered about how that process is going to work. The smaller grants can be in any of the main categories that we've talked about before, in health or public safety or the environment. Like I said, that's up to $5,000. Yeah.
Can the moms get money from that?
So we've actually had conversations with the moms, and we are trying to help them find other sources of funding, because one of the things that we just don't want to, we don't want anyone to think that there's like a fix in or anything, because they've been so helpful and we've been so close in this process. We just want to make sure that everything is looking to the entire community like we're not playing favorites.
So you guys aren't going to give the moms any money?
At this point, out of these funds, no. We are looking at other potential sources of funding for the moms.
Is that just because of the way it looks? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because,
Well, we've...
Because it looks bad?
Well, there's a lot of other organizations, and like I said, we are trying to help the moms do other fundraising. We are looking for other sources of funding and trying to connect them with other sources of funding as well.
That doesn't make any sense because of the way it looks. You're worried. Who are you worried about?
Everybody else, the grants are for the entire community.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So can they apply for the money too?
Through a nonprofit, I know they have a nonprofit fiscal agent, so they certainly could apply for the funds through the nonprofit fiscal agent.
Are you saying you're already going to deny it, or?
It's going to go through we'll go through the same process as any of the other grants.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's just the 2 that we have out now. We are going to be putting another RFP out later in the year for our community greening program. We're still doing a little bit of research on best ways to do that and how we can encourage collaborations among organizations for those sorts of grants, and that'll probably come out in the fall. We are, for our public safety grants, we are in conversations and have been having great conversations with the Pattonville Fire District. For our healthcare grants, we are still looking at that process and doing a lot of research on that. We have a lot of learning to do. Every time we think we've got it, something else comes up and we're like, wow, we haven't thought about that part either. So we're looking at healthcare access. We're looking at clinics, school-based clinics, mobile clinics, telehealth. We're looking at a lot of different things, and we right now are still trying to gather the kind of information that would lead us to figure out what would be the best and most cost-effective way to reach the most people that way. So those grants will probably be out, I'm going to say probably next year at this point, because we want to make sure that we get as much information as we can and start trying to build some partnerships with other funders so that we can magnify the funds that we have.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the category you're issuing in the fall.
Probably the community greening.
Oh, greening.
Yeah,
Can you
greening.
explain what that was?
And community greening in the environment. So we had a lot of feedback at the community meetings and in our focus groups that one of the aspects that people were interested in was health, fitness, community greening sorts of things. So whether that's community gardens or looking at community projects like that and working with organizations that do those sorts of things. You know, we talked with Ed, we talked with a bunch of different organizations. So those will probably, we want to know how to do that well, so we're going to hold off a little bit on that.
Excuse me, but you're looking at community greening in an area 4 miles from the landfill? You're looking at gardens?
Raised beds on raised beds.
That's,
Okay.
yeah, that's why again, we're not running these out right away. We want to make sure we do it right. But we did hear that was one of the things that community members wanted.
You were talking about telehealth, is that?
It's one of several things that we're looking at in terms of the healthcare.
Can you elaborate what that is?
So telehealth would be like if they had clinics at area schools where they could connect with the doctors by, Skype, telehealth kinds of things. It's a growing field of healthcare access around the country, and it would be a way to get more access to healthcare. We're thinking specifically probably in schools, but there may be other, like I said, we're still doing a lot of research on this. There may be other avenues for using that telehealth if that's the way we decide to go, and we haven't decided that yet.
Is that relatively inexpensive compared to going to the doctor, or you guys haven't actually gotten?
Well, as opposed to, do we have to do transportation for people to get from here to a doctor, or can we have a location more centrally located for people in this community who can then talk to a doctor by phone? It might be a lot less expensive for people to be able to access several remote locations by phone rather than one clinic here or one clinic here. Like I said, we're still researching. We don't have any numbers to put behind that at all yet. Yeah. And it's just one of the options that we're looking at this point.
Where are you guys at with the fire department? I know there was equipment they needed.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of really good discussions with them, and they are putting together a proposal for us for an industrial pumper truck. And we've actually had a really good conversation with the fire chief and Steve Stenger's office, trying to see if there's any possible way we can amplify those funds and maybe get some additional funds to help with that cost. I don't know if that's going to actually pan out, but it was a great conversation.
So, are you saying there's not enough money in the fund?
No, there's enough money in the fund, but the fire department said, if we can find some additional funds somewhere else, then you can use those funds for one of the other initiatives. You can use those funds for the public health part or one of the other initiatives. So, it's sort of a cooperative, trying to work together so we can get the most money out into the community as possible.
To clarify that, and I don't mean to speak for the fire department at all, if they were to have that piece of equipment, my understanding is it would be shared or it'd be available
Yes.
for other emergencies in the area that would need that kind of equipment. So it would kind of make sense that there might be other places that would want to chip in.
Yeah, that was sort of our argument to the county executive was this is not, this piece of equipment, although it will be housed here, will be available for any sorts of emergencies that would use that kind of equipment. It will be a countywide asset.
How long is it going to take to make that decision? And is there a time frame for making that decision?
our decision or I can't tell you the county executive's timeframe. So we're just waiting. We're working with the fire department to put together the numbers of what the actual equipment that they need. I mean, I've seen beautiful pictures of pumper trucks online, but we're not going to be ordering the equipment, so that we're working with them. So I'm assuming that that process, you know, will be done within the next couple of months at the latest. And then there's a timetable for ordering the equipment and the equipment coming in, which.
Because I know you said you're focusing on the small
Yeah.
stuff, and this is obviously.
This is on a parallel track.
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
getting that industrial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on a parallel track.
Has there been like a division of monies where you're gonna spend this much on small grants, this one much on medium, this much on large grants? Has that decision been made?
In general, and I'll say that it's a little flexible still, because we don't know what the amount of requests that we're gonna get in is. And let me see if I have that with me. Don't know if I brought those actual numbers, and I don't wanna lie to you. And I don't have those numbers with me, but I'm thinking that our small grant total is around $250,000 total. The public safety grants are gonna come in at somewhere around 1.5 million. The healthcare one is the one we're thinking is gonna be the biggest, probably 6 or 7 million. And then the mental health and community greening are gonna fill out the rest. And like I said, we don't know what other sorts of projects or suggestions we're gonna get from people, so it's not written in stone.
So the community greening is gonna be one of the larger grants? Did I misunderstand?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I would have to check those numbers. I think community greening it's less than $1 million, but yeah, but I couldn't tell you exactly what that number is.
Can we go back to the garden? Who's asking for the garden?
Well, we've had conversations with conservation, environmental organizations, recreation organizations, all of that is gonna fall under that. We're not like looking for someone to build a garden. We're going to see what organizations in the community have to propose under a topic of community greening.
Maybe it's the name of the category then, so
Yeah.
greening
Yes.
would be like out,
It doesn't look good.
yeah, or.
Well, it would be teaching people how to safely grow vegetables around radioactive landfills.
I mean, we came up with, these were sort of the general areas, when we did the community meetings, these were sort of the general areas that we heard responses from, that people were interested in programs in those areas.
That's what that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to know, was like what types of organizations, who are these people? So,
Well, I mean, these were just the general responses we got from all of the focus groups and community. It's not like we have a specific nonprofit that says, I want to do gardens.
okay.
You know, we will wait to see what kind of responses we get when and if that RFP goes out.
And can you say what RFP means?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I can. Request for proposals, RFP is request for proposals, which basically means people submitting grant applications for these funds. And I actually do have the copies, a few copies of each of the RFPs that are out now, the one for mental health and substance abuse services and the one for the small grants, if anyone cares to look at them. You can just, I have copies if you want to take them with you. They are also on our website, as is the actual application form, which you would have to fill out online anyway, so I just didn't bring those with me. But it's based on the Missouri Common Grant application. One second, Harvey, this was first.
When it's all said and done, are you gonna have a list available of all the groups and organizations that requested money and then you accepted or declined? Is that gonna be available to the public?
It should be. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. I believe that has always been the plan, was to list the organizations that apply for funds and the organizations that receive the funding.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Take her question.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so I had talked to Ms. George earlier about when people put their proposal in, that we should post it before they're awarded. Is that going to happen?
We don't have the full proposal process yet, but I think we probably will not do that, and I'll tell you why. We will have the chance for community to observe the deliberations of the grant committee when they meet. And the grant committee is going to be made up of several Community Foundation board members and several community members. And so in accordance with a lot of best practices for grants, we are doing this, the responsibility lies with us to make this decision. And so we're doing it the same way many other public granting agencies do it, so that it will be open, so that people can observe what is said and how the deliberations go. But I think that we probably would never be able to make a decision if we have public comment on every single grant application that is received. Harvey.
You mentioned that the small grants would only be granted to organizations that are supported.
Physically located within the, yeah.
Is there a reason for that? Is that part of the settlement, or is that something you decided?
That's something that we decided, because we really, these grants are really designed for those grassroots level organizations, the food pantries, the organizations that are right here doing work in this community every single day. And, organizations that are small enough that a $5,000 grant could really be very helpful for them. And there's not a lot of organizations that, they're going to take their little $5,000 grant and come and do something substantive in this community. But there are organizations that are already doing substantive work in this community where $5,000 could be very helpful to them.
Like the mom.
Like the moms. When you get the request for proposal, is there, and the committee is looking at them, are there specific criteria that they're looking for, that you're comparing one to another or whatever? And is that something that we didn't know what the criteria is?
Yeah, so the general criteria are in the RFPs, which are certainly available to take or to see online. And the form that we're using is the Missouri Common Grant application, so there are specific questions that you have to answer about whatever program it is you're looking for. And so we will be hopefully able to compare apples to apples in terms of the different requests that we get in.
So on the review board that you're going to have,
Yes.
when you say community members, what does that look like?
So we've been talking with Dawn and Karen for some recommendations of some people. We're looking for some business representation. We're looking for, yeah. But they're. I'm sorry. Yes, that was misleading. But we've been asking them for their input on what are the types of people that are in the community that would be helpful to have on the committee. So business people, some people who have experience with some of the topics that we're talking about, other healthcare funders, for example, people who are involved in the what's the word? Chamber, the regional chamber, the county chamber, but I don't have specific names for you yet because we haven't gotten those people yet.
Okay, and then, so, this is a public request. Can you please live stream those meetings?
Very good suggestion, and I think that we probably will, because we had such a good experience with live streaming the community meeting that we did. That was really a good suggestion. So yes, thank you.
Well, the other representative just stole one of my things, the live streaming. But I was kind of curious, do you have a definition for the makeup of the board and the appointment process?
So the majority of, a lot of the committee is gonna be people from our community.
And how many people?
And that's gonna be, and I should have brought this information, I apologize that I did not. That's going to be 6 of the members. And then we have definitions for who we're looking for in those other, and I can send that to you, and I can send it to Dawn and Karen too. Which is, you know, business representation, people who have history in funding the environment, people who have history in funding health, so that we can get those sorts of expertise on the board. People, I think we have people represent, the only thing that we're trying to avoid is having someone who represents a nonprofit organization who may apply for funding. So that's really the only thing that we're looking to keep out of there.
So will the board be 6 and 3? 6 and 3 for a total of 9?
We're looking at, I think, 14,
Okay.
13 or 14 total on that committee.
And the appointment process?
The appointment process is, right now, we are doing our research to find out from different community members who they might recommend to have on that board. So then we're going to do some research to find out if they have maybe some grant-making background, because it's what people do for a living. There's a process that it has to go through for figuring out what these grants are, and then reaching out to see if those our board members don't really have a choice. So then seeing if those folks will serve on this board.
And I guess I'm looking for a little bit more detail in the appointment process. I've heard you say you're asking some community leaders, but when you're putting a board together, it's really important how the folks are put on there. Like some boards are a mix of appointments by elected officials and appointments by an election. Some boards are.
Yeah, and this is it's a grant review committee. It's not like it's a fiduciary board.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
But I'm curious about that process, because it's possible to sometimes load one of these bodies depending on the process of appointment. And I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, we are right now, the process is purely an internal one for the community foundation, and we're trying to get as much input into that as we can. We think we have some good names that we're looking at, but we haven't really asked the folks yet, so I can't say what those names are.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to get insight into the process. That's all.
I'm a little concerned about who's going on a committee, because, I don't know how to phrase this. We're looking at 4 miles from the landfill, within 4 miles. And it seems that people are kind of coming out of the woodwork for these grants, right? And so can we request or make sure that the people within that 4-mile radius are involved? Because we know what the problem is here, and those people that are on writing these grants, they've never heard of West Lake Landfill.
And that's a really good point, and that's why we do want to have that community representation from folks within this area, because, and hopefully the grant process will be enough to make it clear that, oh, this is just someone who saw there's some money here and they want to get it, versus here's someone who's been working in the community for a very long time and they know what the issues are that are facing the people who live here. That's ideally what the grant process should determine.
So, I'm getting ready to step in it here.
Step in it, Paula, step
Are
in
you
it.
going to put any elected officials on this committee?
No.
Thank you. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a good choice.
Good choice. Good choice.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Now we want to introduce our new Assistant Fire Chief, Jim Usry, to give us an update.
Good evening. letting me speak tonight. We had, over the past several weeks, when I've received my appointment from the chairman, Mr. Esplin, as far as this position, been extremely busy, a lot of meetings, education in that, a lot of fact finding on our part, and we're just, we want to reiterate to the community that, you know, after Matt has gone on, that we are the watchdog for the community, just like the community leaders and the community groups in our area. So we are reviewing all the documentation from the DNR, from St. Louis County Air Quality Management, and the different groups that provide us the information, and we're just making sure that everything that is provided that we can identify as correct and factual. We did a site tour today at the facility, educational. We had a lot of questions, and they're providing more information as far as documentation to make my job easier as well. And just trying to decipher some of the data that's issued on a weekly as well as monthly basis. So we're working with the organization there to get the information and new information just detailed the way it's easier for us to digest. So we've been very busy with the community meetings, very active there, and just briefings on what's going on. For the site itself, some of the things as far as our stakeholders meetings, conference calls are done every other week. And there's not a lot of activity on the site, but they are doing things that may, the appearance of their activities, such as you'll see on the east side of that landfill where they're reinforcing some sediment areas, and they kind of define why they're doing those things, such as to make sure that the area is reinforced so it's not retaining water, so everything's shedding properly. Or we're watching all the activity on the site itself. We're reviewing those documents, just as Karen and Don and everybody involved in the room, with the air quality reports, the groundwater reports, and asking the questions of why are we waiting for this, why are we waiting for that report. So we are voicing our opinions to those groups as well, and making it known that we are there to watch and observe and to make sure everything's done correctly.
Why would you not want it to retain water if there's radioactivity there?
The whole site, depending on which core area we're talking about, or depending on OU1 or Area 1 or 2. It's typically it's the south quarry that they're reinforcing the most, as far as with fill, clean fill on top of it, just so it sheds water, so it doesn't provide more weight to that area, which would contribute to more sloping, if you would. Okay, so if we reinforce it so water sheds off that pile, it does better for lack of sloping and opening up to make a surface fire at any time. So that's why we're watching that. Yes, sir.
Now with the tarp on top, I know there's probably a more technical name, but the big green tarp on top. Now originally it had to where it had no dirt on top of it at all. Now, as the landfill sinks, is that same tarp being buried? Like, so then there's been no repair to the, like more tarp put over. They just keep throwing dirt on top of the tarp?
Right, they're reinforcing it with about 8 inches plus of clean fill and rock. Once they have that sediment in a certain area, they'll perforate the tarp so it doesn't hold water or more weight as it begins to start to settle underneath the tarp, so void spaces. So they'll perforate and they'll cut those areas of the tarp and then reinforce it with the soil and rock.
Okay.
Again, supporting the shedding of the water on top of it.
So, I was kind of curious when you asked that question, what is the condition of the tarp underneath the soil? Because our understanding is the tarp is there as a buffer to bad things getting out into the air. And soil might not be a complete filter for that. I'm kind of curious, do we know if there are gases escaping even though it's collapsed? Do we assume that the heat has moved on, or has the heat moved on after the collapse? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we still have high heat temperatures in the southern quarry, in that southern southeast corner of that south quarry. So we're monitoring those temperature wells. The sediment, they monitor with air quality devices, and they found that after they perforated the tarp, that they're still monitoring the area and we're not getting anything through that rock base. So if it changes, they will change or re-add more.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. But if it's identified that there's either air sampling or groundwater, then they'll reevaluate on how they cover that as well. But right now, you'll see a lot of areas of that rock base being covered on the south side of the port. So that's the biggest activity that we see, is that south face of the south port. Everything else, our weekly reports, they report on any incidents that happened on property. There was a medical call that a woman wandered into the south reservoir, if you would. And it was identified into, is a basin. It wasn't through the fence. She was disoriented and ended up in a place she shouldn't have been, and it was caught by the cameras, which also have thermal imaging capabilities. So they picked up on the body moving in that field. So that was good. She was transported to the hospital, taken care of, and she was treated properly.
Were you talking about that lagoon that's behind the original lift station?
Yes, ma'am.
No kidding.
She was all the way on the edge by the canal. Right
Did she drive?
there. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she had an altered level of consciousness. She was driving for several hours. She was confused, and she was. It was a great thing that they caught her because it was extremely cold that night, and we could have had a hypothermic situation because of her life-threatening condition.
Bridgeton PD said she was a 90-year-old woman
Yes.
who had driven over 100 miles before she went down that road and found herself at a dead end.
Yeah. So it's good. The system is working as far as those monitored cameras, the thermal imaging part of those cameras, and they're making good communication with the local PD. So that's good. The other thing, as far as the investigation with the gas extractor, piping, if you would, that we had the fire in November. We're still reviewing the cause. They had area experts in that identified areas that it wouldn't be, or investigated. They couldn't come to a final conclusion, so it's still being investigated.
And you say they, who do you mean?
It's Republic. And then they confirm the results, and we identify, agree or disagree at that point once they finalize their investigation. But the piping's still on site and it's still being reviewed. So we're watching that closely. Right now, it's leaning towards acts of nature, such as lightning strikes somewhere in the area, or by static in the piping. Trying to figure out why. There was no electrical source nearby.
Which I would just like to say is the scarier alternative, because that to me means something that's naturally occurring is something that's not necessarily preventable. And that's, I think, something that's important to keep in mind. You know, these things do happen, and no matter what we think about when we look at the site and all the engineering, you cannot forget that nature and things like that happen and are always a threat, even though you can't really quantify that. So.
It's a good point, and we'll stay on top of that investigation.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if there's a way to put some grounding in, grounding wiring or something, especially since both of those would be cured with the same technology.
Mm-hmm.
Both of
With
those
that grounding device.
So while they're trying to sort that out, can they just go ahead and start making it safe?
Yeah, we'll work towards that and see what they say as far as providing that option for them. But yeah, again, great point. Other than that, unless anybody has any other questions for me? No. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, we do have a prayer. We just forgot it. Sorry, but I'm going to get to it real quick. Proverbs 3:13. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better results than gold. I think that's fitting for tonight. Okay, so it's been a heavy evening. It's going to get a little bit heavier. I'm sorry, can't help it. Groundwater, OU3. How many of you read that Post-Dispatch article? Okay. So, man, they're good when they're good and they're not when they're not. And this is one of those situations where they kind of got it wrong. This was an editorial, okay, so this was not a normal reporter. This is just an editorial opinion. Two things are going on at this site. You have a cleanup of radioactive waste that was announced this fall, right? Does everybody understand that? They have announced, come to a cleanup of what they're going to do with the radioactive waste. It was out this fall.
So the investigations for that are over. Now, they're looking at the groundwater. The groundwater is its own issue at this site. It was pulled aside somewhat 2 years ago, okay? Because there's a lot going on with it, and despite what that article says, when we get into it, you'll understand, you want them to study this. You want them to figure out, because there's a lot of deep impacts going on at that site. I'll get into it. So, let's go. You guys probably saw the press. Is everybody aware that a press release came out from EPA announcing the new groundwater study? Here it is here. That was sent out by EPA. Okay.
When?
And it was like 2 weeks ago, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that this came out. If you have not, you need to get on West Lake Landfill Facebook page and Just Moms STL, or at least write down our website, because as soon as it came out, we had it up and we're talking about it. So that's the best place you can go. This study is not just radiation related. This is all the chemicals and nasties that have been dumped at this site for decades. And there is a lot. The other thing about this site, you hear us talk about groundwater. What you don't hear us talk about sometimes, and we're going to start putting that back in, is what does the groundwater in this area look like? We're unique here. We have what's called a karst system. This is the best thing that I found. I literally spent 2 hours. I'm absolutely fascinated by it, but scared to death of it after looking at all these karst images. This is what a karst system looks like. It's a series of caves and underwater streams that go all the way throughout the site. This is a limestone quarry that was blasted out, that a bunch of really nasty, toxic waste was dumped in. And we're not talking about Manhattan Project. We'll get to that. We're talking about just in general. Dioxin, white lead paint, Boeing dump there, Olin dump there, pesticides, herbicides, jet fuel, things. Yeah, there is a list, and we'll get that up if you really want to see it, of all the things that are known to have been dumped at this landfill. And we're not illegal to do so. So while we focus a lot on the radiation at the site, sometimes we forget that even if there wasn't Manhattan Project radioactive waste at this site, this would still be one of the most dangerous sites in the nation. Just because of the other chemicals, the location, it's in a floodplain next to the river. So yeah, if you can see this bluff, this is kind of West Lake and Spanish Village, the folks that live on there. This is what's underneath you guys. I mean, you have all these caverns and whatnot. So when you dump chemicals, even if you blast a hole in the site, this is what it looks like under the site. There's all these cracks and fissures and streams. So with that, next. Okay. Part of what EPA released is a legal document that talks about who's responsible so far with the groundwater. But on page 7, number 27, they have a whole list of what's called a findings of fact. It's all these really nasty facts that they know so far about the groundwater. And you have to figure out in your mind and prep yourself for the fact that, saying fact alone, for the fact that there's going to be more added as the investigations go deeper. So how many times, well, I'm going to see everybody's hand, have you heard EPA say it's okay, nobody's drinking the water? Yeah. Guess what they're not saying anymore? Guess what just changed? You can read it for yourself. Groundwater beneath the site is part of the larger alluvial aquifer, which could potentially be used for drinking water by private and/or public wells outside of the site. So that is a huge change. And that is, if you think that public pressure and community pressure doesn't work, you've probably seen that a lot on the page, a couple of doom and gloom, oh, just stop already, nothing's gonna get done. Ask Doug, he's been doing it for decades. Sorry to point you out. But seriously, this is because of you guys. This is because of public pressure that this has come out. And I'll explain in a second on the next slide how we got there. But 13 wells 13 of the on-site wells in the U.S. Geological Survey has documented radium levels above an average dissolve. You can read it for yourself. So we have 13 that are an issue on-site. We don't know how many off-site. This is just what we know on-site. So when you read the post-dispatches thing, I wouldn't even recommend reading it, but if you feel like doing it, you want them to figure this out. And we'll show you why in the next page. Okay. So this is just a location of a lot of groundwater wells. Again, look, see all these little dots, even though they're not highlighted? These are all groundwater wells on site. But you'll notice there aren't any off-site, okay? We're gonna push to hopefully change that, and it sounds like through this document, EPA has plans to go off-site. Next. Okay. So this little well here, by the way, this whole area is where the fire is. The Missouri River is approximately right off here, okay? Up here, kind of like that. This is what is called a Keokuk well. It's a well that goes deeper than the site. It's about 375. There's some discussion that it may go as deep as 500, 550, but we know that it's deeper than the site. So the site is about 350 feet. This well right here, so this is, Deb, can you go back to the karst? Okay, so if this, I know it's hard to see it, say this were the bottom of the quarry, okay? The well would be somewhere down here, okay? It's below, underneath the bowl of the limestone quarry. That is showing high levels of benzene, okay? So again, below the site. We're not talking about the groundwater that goes in and out of the site like we know it does with the river. Next. We can skip that. Here's the reading. Here's the reading right here. PZ101KS. That's that well you saw. That's the reading that we're getting for benzene, okay? You've got a couple of gas extraction wells. Look at these that have some pretty high benzene levels, which is interesting because these aren't water wells. These are gas wells that are showing high levels of benzene, which is why they're noted out, because they're trying to figure out why that is. But of specific importance to tonight is this. That is why you saw the change in number 27 in the findings of fact. So what has to happen now, and believe it or not, our State Department of Natural Resources, there's a whole list of comments. Do you have that one, Deb, or no? There we go. You can't read them. But if you get on our website, we have them posted, okay? And we'll post them back on the page. These are comments that Missouri Department of Natural Resources has given to Republic in reference to what they're seeing in the groundwater. And I think what you're going to find if you read them, you can read them yourself, what you're going to find is they sound like they were written by us. They sound like Ed wrote them, or Doug or Harvey, or, you know, or Jim. They sound like they're asking the right questions. And we don't often see that. So when we do, we really do get excited and rejoice, because it's hard. You have a state agency that is asking about it, and you have the federal agency that is asking. And it's always comforting when those two are on the same page. When they're not, that's when it gets tough. But as of right now, they are. They're asking good questions. In fact, those deep wells, can we go back to those wells? Can we go back to the one with the circle? Okay, so there's this one, but there's 4 of them. Republic actually wanted to evacuate these wells. They wanted to abandon them. And the state said, no, we're getting a strange reading. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep testing them and keep them in operation. So again, it's good to see that happen and have that happen on its own without any of us having to scream and holler at them to do that. That's reassuring. So in light of this, and I think Karen's going to talk about this more, about hope, or do you still think we need to? It's a pretty heavy meeting. But in light of this, nothing coming out of this site, no study is ever going to give you good news. Okay? I'm not being a Debbie Downer, we're just saying it like it is. You cannot ever think, okay, we're going to get a data dump that says everything's okay. And I think the hard thing is that for so long, you guys have known in your hearts, those of you that live in Spanish Village, you know the impact, you know what this does to people, you know your symptoms, you know what it looks like. But when you see these things happen, when you see these studies that come out and are like, oh, now it's in the groundwater. Yeah, it is. But you have to remember that we are still, if we're gonna push to fix it, and when I say fix it, I mean try and make it as best as we can, meaning make it better, not make it perfect, because we're past that. That's not even gonna be the case along Coldwater Creek. We're in the process, all of us, of making the whole situation that happened in St. Louis better by degrees. But the perfect level isn't gonna be achievable, it's not. And that doesn't mean that we don't continue to push for them to get it as good as they can. This is part of that process. We gotta, yes.
Can you explain what you mean by the well's operational and they wanted to evacuate it or whatever? And why is that good or bad?
Absolutely. So, because, I don't think it's on.
Try now.
Is it on? No.
No. You might have turned it off.
No, I don't know how to even turn it on, Deb.
Take the other one.
There you go. Oh, that one's on. Hello. In order to make, to draw water from that well, it's deep, sometimes it's hard. You know, it has a tendency to want to collapse naturally, but they have to go down pretty deep to get a reading. And sometimes they gotta let it sit. It's just more labor intensive to get a reading. It doesn't mean that they can't. And it's also more expensive to keep that well open. And so, and also, I'm just being honest, they don't like the reading coming out of it. Let's just go there. They didn't like what they saw from that well. And they knew that they were going to be asked to test the other deep wells, and they are. So that's what we're looking at this site. That's why they wanted to cap it and collapse it and just let it go and not draw water from it anymore. And DNR said, no, we haven't, and they actually say it in the documents, we have an unusual reading in this well, meaning, and they say, you best go back and test the others, and then they go a step further. They ask them to reinvestigate and do further digging on the karst system under the site. So they're asking as the state, hey, something's going on under the site. We need to figure out what that looks like. So, question? Oh, sorry.
Can I follow up then?
Yeah.
Different kind of question, but we talked about.
I think the wording was kind of careful where it said it could be traveling to drinking water and it could be traveling off-site. So all the testing that you're showing so far is testing on-site. I know EPA has said forever there's no evidence that anything's traveled off-site. DNR finds something in the water and EPA says, well, it's not the drinking water. So can you close the loop on that or connect those?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you cannot find what you don't look for. And for the longest time, they haven't been looking for it because they had no evidence to indicate that there was even a way for it to leave the site. But with it being in this well, which you can see, is this well's technically off-site. It's outside of the quarry. It's right there on the edge. It may not be outside of their legal boundary as Republic, but this is technically off-site, and it's technically under. They now have evidence that there is a mode of transport, a mode for it to get where it should not be. And so now they have to advance the investigation. And we're going to have to, I know where you're going with this, we're going to have to pressure them because they're still not going to want to dig and drill wells where they need to. In our opinion, everything goes towards the river. So somewhere between this site and the river could be a plume if it's in the aquifer. Could be even in the groundwater. If it's in the shallow groundwater, it could be there. But if it's in the aquifer too. So they're going to have to go off-site. And I'm sure that's going to be a fight. But it sounds like it's a fight that, I mean, we're going to push for, but it sounds like DNR is gearing up for that fight. Does that make sense? They're already saying, hey, get ready, you're going to be made to do this.
When the folks are new, can you describe what the plume is?
A plume is like, man, if you have contamination in groundwater, it's like trying to measure where that is. Does that make sense? It's like a giant bubble of toxic whatever. Has anybody ever been to Weldon Spring? Okay, so if you're really interested in seeing what a plume looks like, and I would recommend you go there anyway because they do have an interpretive center that explains the history of the Manhattan Project. They do a really good job, but there is a diagram that the Army Corps has, and they will show you the plume out there, how they measure what's in it, and how certain areas have a plume of uranium out there. There's all sorts of different chemicals out there too, not just radioactive waste. So, and they can talk to you more about how they identify it. That sort of thing is what's going to happen at West Lake, is they're going to try and map it. They're going to have to map the extent, and then they're going to have to figure out what they do once they've figured out the extent. Anybody else?
So,
That's pretty much it.
well, what I was gonna say is maybe, you know, to put it in mind, if you had a puddle on the ground on your driveway, if you had a puddle on the ground in your driveway that's on the surface, not underground, and you get the concept, and there was oil on the ground before that puddle formed, and you'd be able to see the line of the oil floating in the water. And as water travels underground and carries things with it, unfortunately it carries some bad things with it. We don't know if there is a flume right now or where it's headed.
We don't know that people are drinking this. It is not accurate to go, oh my God, you're drinking this right now. That's not accurate. We don't know that. And even if it did get to the drinking water intake, there are filtration and stuff that's done. We don't know if this would affect that, if it would overpower it. We are in the infant stage of this.
That's a plume.
That's a plume. That's not our plume. That is a plume. When we say plume, it's just a map of the contamination in the water. So,
Dawn, can we go back to the,
yeah.
go back one, the PZ well down there?
Yeah.
Is that Banker?
Yeah, is that the part that abuts Baker's backyard?
Yes.
Where the
Yes.
canals are?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just checking.
But isn't that where they're pulling all the dirt?
It is where they're pulling all the dirt. It is. This site, we try not to overwhelm you all with science, but I'm happy to put this up for you guys on the website. We have documents from as far back as, well, they go all the way back as far as it goes, but from 2007, this thing without a fire was putting off a lot of benzene, more than Champ, and Champ is way bigger than West Lake and Bridgeton combined. So there has always been a benzene source at this site, whether it's in the air, the groundwater. That is not new, that just simply is the way it is. You know, it's not ideal. It's not good news, but it's a step in the right direction. And what EPA is saying is there's going to be overlapping. As they're studying the groundwater, they will probably continue to study it even after they open the ground and begin digging up West Lake. They don't anticipate any delays. But I'm going to say this, we have to be real in this room. Even without the groundwater, digging up West Lake, we want them to do this, we want them to dig up this waste, but remember, it's a surprise when there are no surprises. Bob Alvarez came out and said that. It's true. If you look at any site, whether it's radioactive waste, dioxin, whatnot, delays happen. We as a community are going to have to work through that. If they're digging and they find something, or they find an area that's a little bit more complicated and they need to step back for a second and re-examine it and figure out what to do, we want them to. We all want to be kept safe. We want the workers kept safe. What we can't do, and what I think you're seeing to some extent, is anytime there's a delay, like, oh, they're delaying again. See, there may be some of that, and if there is, we're going to call them out on it. But when it's a delay to just stop and regroup and figure out what to do next, we're gonna have to work through that. It's just gonna be part of this process, and it's going to happen. It just is. Anybody else?
Well, I don't know that I need the microphone. I just did want to add that as we go into work being done on the rod that was announced, we made extremely certain that if something in the groundwater were to be affected by the rod is open to amendment again to open for that allowance. So if there's something that they're discovering in the groundwater during the course of working the rod, they're going to amend it and try and make a correction on the fly to better
Yes.
solve both problems.
Yes, absolutely. You know, just as we are gonna push them, and we are gonna push them, we're gonna push them to the absolute limits we can push them when it comes to digging at this site. And there are gonna be areas, especially in Area 2, where I think we can get them to go a little deeper, and we know that, and you know we're gonna push for that. But then, there may be areas in Area 1, in that mound area, where they don't wanna go as deep. And that's gonna be up to your workers. We need skilled labor, we really need our operating engineers at this site. They did a lot of the work at Weldon. We have the Kansas City Corps of Engineers. You know, it's gonna be keeping an open line of communication and just working through it. This isn't something that you want rushed. I know there's a lot of people that are like, wow, it's gonna take 2 years. Listen, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and we need to be okay if it takes 3, okay? Simultaneously, as we are focused on this, we have never forgot that our #1 thing right now is to get our people in Spanish Village safe. That is and has been and will continue to be our #1 priority. We're working on the whole buyout thing. We're working on a type of a buyout that is like a property assurance plan, which is if you want to leave and sell your house, your home is guaranteed for the full market value, meaning you can legally disclose everything. You can leave them a 5-inch binder and make them read it and sign every line, and then you'll take a hit, but then you won't personally lose out on money, and you can leave. Here, that doesn't seem like enough for a lot of people, but hear this. Even if Republic or anybody comes in tomorrow and buys those homes, there is nothing we, your legislators, or anybody can do to stop them from then turning around and reselling them to another unsuspecting. We have no say, so there is nothing, even in a buyout, that prevents somebody coming into your home once you're out. And not being told, they don't have to disclose that they bought people out. This happened at Love Canal. There are people living in homes at Love Canal that they were resold. Yes?
Can there be like legislation enacted that would prevent that?
Can't there be legislation enacted? So, yes, EPA can put something in place. You have state reps here. Do you feel comfortable talking about how difficult legislation is in the state of Missouri?
We can submit legislation for this specifically. It is actually a state law. This is state by state, and you can define it by proximity to Superfund site. The idea that it will be selected by the Speaker of the House to even be heard in committee is slim to nothing. Much less get out of committee to be voted on by the floor, much less go to the Senate for a competitive bill. But submitting legislation is fine. You put it on there. I'm happy to put my name to it. I'll do it this week.
I hear that, but I don't, if you can't pass it, that's the thing.
It gets talked about if it's submitted, and that's the thing.
But
we know there's due diligence and conversation.
there is, but there's also not when half of the legislature is owned by Republic. So that's the other thing. It's the best way to get this done, it's twofold, is to probably go to EPA and propose this be added into the overall Superfund program. And we're happy to talk about strategy after this, but we won't get into it too much up here because I'm sure we have somebody from Republic in the audience. but
Yes.
we feel like this is necessary and we're never gonna stop pushing for it.
Kind of off topic a little bit, but I'm an operating engineer, and we train for this every year. We serve, we do everything we have to do to prepare ourselves in case we already get called out. So operating engineers are not, even some of the guys that work on the well in Springs, they still get trained every year for this.
Right.
The
You guys
question
have
is-
your own facility too.
Right. So the question was posed in one of our hazmat and rad classes and MSHA classes, all that, was if you were called out to go, would you go? And out of 60 people, not one person raised their hand. So that kind of tells you what you're dealing with.
Right.
I mean, what you guys don't see, we see. So think about that just a little bit. Like I said, kind of off topic, but if 60 people, none of them want to go, that kind of tells you what you're dealing with.
Right, right. It's the most dangerous job you can think of on that site. And, for some of the I will tell you, for those given a choice, but we are also hearing on the other side, and granted, they're not operating engineers. They may not even be skilled labor, but there's quite a line of people that do want that work. And so it's not going to be an issue of finding people, it's going to be an issue of finding qualified people, and it's also going to be an issue of making sure, just like out at Weldon and other places, that workers are comfortable being honest about their fears and their risks of the job and making sure they're trained and they have what they need.
To be real honest, I believe they're not going to tell people. Companies are going to come from out of town and they're not going to let their people know exactly how dangerous this is because they're not going to be skilled workers. They're not going to have the training. Now, I don't know, I could be wrong with that, but it's going to be hard to find skilled labor people to do that.
Right. Well, but I know they are going to be covered under the EEIOCP. I think there's a 2 Ps at the end of that program. So because this is a DOE site, they are going to be covered under the Nuclear Workers' Compensation packet. So there are incentives that may also appeal to them, but no, this is tough work. And I think that we as a community have a long way to go through this cleanup. And it is going to be a little bit like Coldwater Creek. We do hope that EPA is constantly out here twice a year updating us. And I know they're going to be updating us behind the scenes, but for you guys, it would be great to have them come forward and just be honest. Do you guys have anything else? Hi.
Hey, Dawn. I've got a microphone.
Okay.
Ed Smith, I work for Missouri Coalition for the Environment. And partially to your point, sir, is that there is a group meeting with the EPA next week as part of the Community Advisory Group Technical Committee. And these are the type of questions that'll be asked. This is the first meeting we've had with them since the record of decision came out. So we'll be getting an update on their planning processes for the removal of the radioactive material, as well as the next steps with the groundwater investigation and questions of worker training, how are the workers being informed exactly by the EPA, and making sure that information is being disseminated, regardless if it's local 513 or a group out of Montana. That's the type of information we're going to be looking at, and use these meetings as an opportunity to relay what happens in those meetings with the community.
Yes.
Are we inviting 513 to this meeting?
It's not mine, and I think what Harvey's saying as chair of the CAG is that it is premature because this is the first time we'll be meeting as the tech committee with EPA, and the tech committee isn't just a CAG thing. So we got to reestablish connection and reestablish what this looks like with EPA. I think that before we pack a table with 20, 30 people in there, we got to at least get in with EPA real quick, figure out what they are, what their updates look like, who they can make available, and then the tech committee has to regroup. But yeah, I think eventually workers, especially coming to this meeting, we appreciate you coming because you are on our mind. It is not something that, you are on our mind. And we do want to make sure that we remember that even though we live in the community, we have people that work in the community, and that, we have people that do business in the community, and that we are representing everybody, so.
Yes, and I do think that that's an excellent suggestion. It's just a little premature right now to do that. We need to be a little bit further down the road and have the process for reviewing this particular activity in place with EPA. We've done this with previous work that we've been doing at the site with EPA, and it's worked out well, but this is the first meeting, so it's really establishing the ground rules, if you would, for how we're going to work together.
This is a new administration too. This is a new administration, new people at the table, so, anybody else?
Much better administration.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone? That's it? Nothing else? Okay.
I want to point out Mark Dietrich. Tracy here. Mark, do you have an update on those flyers? Or is that not?
No, I don't.
Okay, we'll get with you later. Also, even though you don't have any Bridgeton Ward residents here, you do have Mike Mason that's running for office. Raise your hand, Mike. He's running in this ward, so that's a huge thing going on in this community. There's a lot of good stuff going on. You've got Bill Esterline that's up for election that's running. You've got a team of people. You've got both state reps here. You've got the county executive's office here. You've got emergency response. And just remember to look around. You have a lot of people that care about you now. That's changed quite a bit.
Okay, I just want to, if you don't know, there is a FOOS rep meeting next Thursday night in regards to the cleanup in North County with Coldwater Creek. 6 to 8 Hazelwood Civic Center East on Dunn Road. It's my understanding it's open format. It's open format. Stations, ask your questions, get some answers. Do you have anything else to add to that?
No, thanks. I just wanted to let everybody know we're doing that. That's why I come to these meetings. My name is Scott Ross, and I'm the Public Affairs Chief at the St. Louis District. And so I talked with Dawn and Karen and asked if I could partner with you guys. Part of my job is community relations, community outreach. And there's been a void, I think, with the district in reaching the community. And I'm going to meetings a couple a week, everything from levy district meetings and flood preparedness meetings to meetings like this, and that's part of my job. And I know that although we don't have anything to do with West Lake Landfill, I know that the community that is a part of this group has impacted a lot of you in the areas where we do have some responsibility for cleaning up the bad stuff that's there. And we can't do anything about the past, but we can do everything we can to try to make your lives better going forward in those areas. And that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to let you know what we're doing. Yes, ma'am.
I understand that the meeting's going to be an open concept. We really don't like that. Is there any way that we can have some input as to getting a question and answer for everybody? It just seems a big waste of people's time to go from table to table when we all have the same questions. Where's the testing? How come it has to be repeated? How come there's not enough people?
First, I'm new to the board, and we've done them different ways from what I understand in the past. We've done them this way in the past. We've done town hall forums like this in the past. I don't know which way is better. I hear what you're saying, and we'll take that into consideration for next year.
Yeah,
thanks. And that's part of the reason I come to these, is to hear that kind of stuff.
Just so you know, the ATSDR
They will be there?
meeting that they held a couple of months ago when they released the study that ATSDR did of,
yes, sir.
of Coldwater Creek, it started out in your format and it ended up as a town hall because people just demanded it. So I just want to let you know that's the community you're walking into.
But yeah, I understand.
The other thing is, when do you expect some kind of a group to come be around, like Just Moms for Coldwater Creek? I mean, a lot of us in this room have been impacted by Coldwater Creek, and it's very painful to see the people of that area not know what's going on out there.
I don't understand I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking.
Just asking if there's a grassroots organization that's on the ground,
Exactly.
trying to get the information out. And I think that
I know this organization, and that's why I reached out. And I know that there's also the Coldwater Creek Just the Facts Please organization.
Well, that's a Facebook page.
Well,
We've also been made to feel very, very unwelcome.
I'm sorry?
We've been made to feel very, very unwelcome.
Welcome where?
In those meetings, even, by all agencies on that. I mean, one of the first things that is said when we first walk in that room, this is not a West Lake meeting, don't answer any questions.
We can't.
And we get that, we get it, but it's just like, why are you off the bat coming at us? We're here just as much.
And I will tell you, the sign when you walk in that says that on there, and that's something that I argued and lost. When you walk into the Civic Center, there's a sign that says, who's rep meeting, and right underneath it, it says, not a West Lake Landfill meeting. I am trying to take small steps. There's a culture. And part of me being here helps so that I can go back and say, hey, look, this is what I've learned. We were going to have the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
And I came and learned last time, and I went back and I said, look, part of our audience can't come because they're torn between whether they're going to go to this one or that one. So I got it switched. So give me some time. I'm new. I feel your pain.
We have had extensive, we've had
You don't even know the beginning of the pain that the people in this room have had because of Coldwater Creek Just the Facts. We have been deleted and blocked from the page. We can't even.
And I'm doing my best to use both organizations to get the word out the best I can to people. And I understand there's something between the two, and I'm trying not to get involved in it.
It's a one-sided.
He cannot weigh in on that, and I'm sure he watches the pages, so I'm sure he does see that, but for the first time, a member of FUSRAP is, this is a good thing, guys. And it's a big step. And you have to remember, like he said, it's just like we went through with EPA, man. You're challenging that old guard a bit. It's hard to open them up and get them to do things. We've been there. So while you got somebody in front of you that's trying, hats off to them.
Thanks for your comments about the format. And I saw the video from last year's, and they made the decision to do it this way before I even got involved in the planning. I don't know what the best answer is going back and forth. I don't know. The purpose, though, is to try to answer questions. We're trying to help. So.
One of the problems with the individual format, whatever you call that, is if you have 7 or 10 people standing around trying to hear what they're talking about, you can't because the room is full of all these multiple conversations. Maybe you can give the speakers a small little personal PA system or something. I'm not saying that facetiously, just something so you can hear the question and answer in that small group that's huddled around whatever posters you have up.
I've asked them to try to make it a little more personable. For instance, little things, right? Around the room, we'll have stations. And they were going to have tables, and they were going to stand behind them. I said, no, put the table against the wall. Be out front with the citizens and the people that were there to serve and talk with them. And my colonel has told them to quit talking like scientists. Talk like people, all right? Use words that everybody can understand. And don't speak in acronyms, and don't go back and just talk about microns and whatever. And everything goes right over my head. I used to be a helicopter pilot. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. And the second half of my Army career was public affairs. Trust me, everybody involved in the program at St. Louis District really wants to help. We're just trying to do our best. and we really want to be able to make information available for you, and that's what we're trying to do. I don't know what the best format is, we'll just keep going back and forth in between now and when we do the next one. Maybe we can have some meetings and share some ideas, and maybe it's smaller meetings. Maybe it's more frequent. Maybe it's instead of doing it once a year. I don't know what the answer is, but we're willing to explore everything. And you know, we do have our facilities. You don't have to wait until then. And almost all of the information that we're making available is also on our website. So it's always there. We're just trying to make it, just now.
So if you're taking suggestions, I have a great suggestion that I'd like you to take to the higher ups regarding any remediation sites done by food scrap in the Coldwater Creek area, to not just have restricted area, do not enter when you're cleaning up Manhattan Project waste. I would prefer, that would deter me about as much as somebody saying, don't go over there, because I'm gonna go over there. But if I see a radiation sign, like what they used to put when they were cleaning those ball fields at Berkeley, that would make me stop and think twice.
So we used to have a radiation sign and now we don't?
Yes, now it's just do not enter restricted area.
Yeah, when we went around Dixon, terrible most of the people in the neighborhood had no idea, they thought they were just getting new playground equipment.
They thought it was new playground
They had no
equipment.
clue what was actually happening, so they was kids, when we were there, it got hard, you'd see kids coming in and out, I mean, they just had like a little orange fence around it, but nothing else really.
Yeah, just something a little bit more specific, because I tell you what, if you did put the red signs back on that stuff, people would just.
Signage has been an issue
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah.
Signage has
Signs
been,
are a
because
major
I've heard that
issue.
I've heard those comments at every
Yeah,
past
signs are a major issue. I'm about ready to spray paint some of those doggone signs with my own.
Are they our signs though? Are they, because I'm not sure if there are signs,
There are no
because I don't know if we
signs
put
along the
signs up or if we're allowed
I
to.
think the county, you guys are.
Yeah, so if it's not on our property, I don't know if we can do
Yeah,
that.
can-
So it might be the municipality.
Yeah, can
or
we
county.
ask that you talk with Linda,
Linda.
St. Louis County, and you guys figure out who has the authority to put signs up along the creek? We keep hearing different things. Food Scrap says it's the
So if
county.
you go to our properties, our recreational areas, yeah, we have signage for that the Corps puts up, but I don't know if we can just go into a municipality or around the county and put
Right.
signs up.
And we've been asked this before, and part of the problem is there's so much area there that's private property. And it got so complicated that there was no way that you could just pick an area and say, we're going to go right along the creek, because then you would be on private property, and then it would have gotten into a big mess. So I've always gotten pushback because of that issue.
And MSD owns some of that too, right? MSD owns
I'm not sure
stuff too.
I mean, I would be satisfied if it was just in the parks.
Yes, or they're cleaning up.
I think that was even an issue in the HBO police, and it was like a no-brainer to me. Why, what is there an issue, and why can't somebody at either the local level, the state level, the county level, the federal level, somebody, it just is a no-brainer. I don't get it. But those are questions that I continue to ask in the Corps, and maybe with something we can. But anyway, thanks for giving me time. I look forward to.
And you can talk to them after too.
So that's really important to us. It's very important to me. I grew up with Coldwater Creek. Tried very hard to be a part of the Coldwater Creek cleanup and what was going on there. Learned I had my own issue going on over here. I had to do whatever I had to do to protect my kids. But this is the first time that we have had someone from the Army Corps come and want to be a part. He's committed to being at our meetings when he can. You know, he's committed to taking suggestions back, answering questions that he can, whatever.
You might not have the answer you want to hear.
Right.
And I may not even be able to find an answer to some, but I will.
All this
promise that I'll
community
try.
ever wants is the truth.
Right.
And if you don't have the truth, tell us you don't have the
No
truth.
matter how ugly it
Because
is.
that's all we want. But I kind of try to liken this to Albert Kelly, that he came in and he cared. When nobody thought he was going to make a difference or, you know, be successful or whatever, even though he is not with the EPA anymore, I think we can all agree that he brought something to this community that pulled us a little bit tighter together. And it gave us a little bit of hope, and we didn't feel so helpless because in a room full of 1,200 people, there was a man and his team finally listening to us and wanted to hear everything we had to say. And so my initial feelings of Scott is the same thing. He cares, he wants to know what's going on, and honestly, I don't care about the drama with Coldwater Creek Girls or any of that other stuff. That is neither here nor there. I do not care. Our motto is stand high above the fray. It's always been our motto, and we don't have time to participate in all the piddly little drama stuff that goes on. You will know, maybe if you followed the page this week, that I got a little bit frustrated with a member on our page that's been there for a very long time that posts doom and gloom. That's all he ever posts. And I know that there are people in this room that have to take a break from this. You have to put your head down and really reorganize your thoughts and, you know, spend more time with your family or whatever it is. You don't want to see those doom and gloom posts all the time, because if you're helpless and hopeless, then you need to move on, because we're not. And we're not going to put up with that here. And, you know, the groundwater issue, we knew it would be bad. No one thought that there was ever going to be good news about that. But guess what? It's out, we regroup, we refocus, and we move forward. And I think that that's, you know, if you need to take a break and step back, by all means do that. Because you're no good to anybody else when you're so down and you feel like there's no hope. You have to regroup. And if there's anything that Dawn and I can do to help with that, I mean, we have private messages behind the scenes with a lot of people. If there's something that you don't want to talk about in public, email us privately at Westlake Mom's Gmail.
Come over and have a cup of coffee. You know, we're available to do that too and have a good cry. And then, yeah, but I think...
But we're to the point where we do not have time for the drama and the riffraff and the negative posting. I know everything's not going to be positive all the time, but it doesn't always have to be negative and helpless either. So you guys know that we couldn't do any of this without you. You are our support. You are this community. You speak for this community. I have children to protect, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect my kids, your kids, this entire community's kids. And I would hope and pray that that's what you guys want to do. You know, you want to make the best of this. We want to get our friends in Spanish Village to safety. We have things to do. We don't have time for the riffraff.
Or the politics.
Our next meeting, Deb?
March 21st.
March 21st is our next meeting, and right here, same time, same place. So, third Thursday. Yeah. That's it. Donation basket is over here behind the little ledge if anybody feels inclined to donate to Just Moms.